70 years have now passed. Democracy on earth has long been restored. No evil on this scale has ever surfaced again. And yet, despite all these facts, who among us can help but to tremble at this sound?
This is a glimpse of the world under the command of Adolf Hitler. With this man as their chancellor, the powerful Nazi party would storm across Europe, making its people subject to years of terror and aggression. And yet, the Nazis did not even come close to realizing their ambitions to their fullest extent. There was still much land they wished to conquer by the time the Allied nations rallied against them. And while 6 million of Europe's Jews fell victim to the Holocaust, it's estimated that over 11 million Jews would actually have perished had this genocide been fully carried out as planned. So what cut short the actions of Hitler's empire? What ultimately caused the Third Reich's downfall? It is now time to analyze why this dark chapter in human history, which could very well have endured to this day, would instead be brought to a close by the end of 1945.
By mid-1940, the Third Reich was gathering power fast. Hitler's army had billowed through Europe, seizing almost 1 million square miles of land from countries like Poland, Norway, France, and the Netherlands. Yet despite all this, the US was still not in the war. England and Russia had still not been invaded, and indeed, the final solution had still not yet gone underway. Would it have been possible for Hitler to simply stop at this point? That is, declare himself content with the Nazi Empire and call it for a truce?
That's a very complicated question. Hitler, in fact, suggested to the British they might wish to make peace at that point. The British debated that, but Churchill, of course, was unwilling to. And so Hitler could not have gotten peace. The British would have remained in the war. They might not have been able to take the offensive on the continent, but they would not have quit any more than they quit against Napoleon. The United States would have supported them economically. However, it is Hitler's personality. The notion that he leave both these major enemies aside, I think, would have been psychologically impossible for him.
Indeed, it seemed too difficult for the Nazis to declare their work done. England had refused to join France in the armistice, their feelings summed up in the words of their bold Prime Minister.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall never surrender.
Anything less than this, however, would not be enough for the Fuhrer. If England chose not to surrender peacefully, it would have to be brought down by force. And this same compulsion to topple England also left Hitler compelled to gain complete control over Europe, that is, to conquer the Soviets as well. Thus, within a single year, Operations Sea Lion and Barbarossa had both been launched. And in taking both on at once, Hitler had effectively condemned himself. Imagine that the Fuhrer had settled even for the lesser of these two objectives and solely gone for England while respecting the Nazi-Soviet Pact of '39. Had that worked out, he'd have eliminated one of his main opponents, prevented the eventual North Africa campaign, and also won Germany several of Britain's oil wells in the region, a resource that the Germans soon ran seriously low on as the war went on. Also, if the United States had hoped to land in mainland Europe as they did on D-Day, they could not have gone 80-some miles across the English Channel and into France, but probably have to journey hundreds of miles across North Africa and the Mediterranean, all throughout enemy territory. It had been close to inconceivable. However, this is not the course that history took. Staggering as Germany's forces were, a Wehrmacht of 18 million men, and a formidable Luftwaffe and Kriegsmarine to match, They were simply not prepared to take on a war on two distant fronts such as this, not to mention operating North Africa and all of its labor camps at the same time. Hence, the Thousand-Year Reich spread itself out far too thin, became an unfocused and disorganized mess, and finally came to a grinding halt, 988 years short of its end. This overambition and lack of foresight soon translated into another key reason for the Nazis' loss: underestimating the impact that the United States would have on the war. While the Neutrality Act kept the U.S. isolated from the conflict at first, American-German relations had worsened steadily over the years, and disapproval against the Third Reich was mounting. Hitler had anticipated the United States' entering the conflict eventually, and felt that he wasn't really risking or changing much by declaring war anyway. He even described the opportunity to do so, which arrived with the attack on Pearl Harbor, as a present that had fallen into the German people's lap. Furthermore, he felt that the United States would really concentrate more on Japan, the country that had actually attacked them. The Axis' combined power, he reasoned, would be more than a match for America.
The German leaders continued to underestimate their American rivals for years, even after drawing them into the war. Consider the situation on the eve of Operation Overlord in 1944. The Germans had only what would prove to be an insufficient barrier in their Atlantic wall. None of the 5 beaches, save Omaha, was adequately manned or fortified. And yet Dr. Joseph Goebbels' sole reaction was a sneer. Er soll nur kommen. Let them come. That is, the German soldiers' will to fight for their homeland will be more than enough to win them this conflict against Eisenhower's troops. 11 months after saying this, Joseph Goebbels would be dead, and the Allies would have destroyed his party's empire forever. Clearly, this punitive attitude that Germany displayed towards the United States would ultimately allow the latter country to free Europe from the evils of the former.
We had, between us and the British and the Russians, overwhelming economic power which they could not meet. They fought very well, but industrially the United States was clearly superior, the Russians were superior, and ultimately the war ended up with that county.